above stars, I trace the outline of a dolphin. I count the hours, I'm in the cradle of the ocean.
Hello and welcome to Jazz Across the Bay, a new online series dedicated to the spirit of jazz everywhere, bringing you conversations with international jazz musicians and educators and jazz enthusiasts to chat about their own jazz journeys and how jazz has inspired their lives. And what better way to start the series than on International Jazz Day, today, the 30th of April. International Jazz Day brings together communities, schools, artists, historians, academics, and jazz enthusiasts all over the world to celebrate and learn about jazz and its roots, its future and impact, raise awareness of the need for intercultural dialogue and mutual understanding, and reinforce international cooperation and communication. Every year on April 30th, this international art form is recognized for promoting peace, dialogue among cultures, diversity, and respect for human rights and human dignity, promoting freedom of expression and reinforcing the role of youth in enacting social change. So my first program of Jazz Across the Bay celebrates this day and celebrates jazz internationally. I'm very, very happy to start the program with Lear Media TV and also in affiliation with Wexford Arts Centre and Jazz Appreciation Series. My three guests today are musicians I've had the pleasure of working with, two from California and one from France. And we might have a couple of extra people to join the party. So I'm absolutely honored to be joined by my guests, two from California and one from France. And the two people from California, saxophonist Lisa Pollard and piano player, a composer, arranger, producer, Frank Martin. And from France is Jericho. And I'm going to have to say it in French. I hope I get the accent right. Traore? Something like that. Jericho, you're known as Jericho, right?
Yes, right, yeah.
All right. Well, bienvenue.
Merci.
And Cade Mila Falcha Acharja, you are also welcome. We also have the founder, or one of the co-founders of Lear Media TV, who is joining us for the conversation. He is a jazz aficionado himself. So I'm going to come to Lisa first, because Lisa, yesterday was the birthday of Duke Ellington, one of
my idol.
Your idol and many others. In fact, he is the icon of jazz of the 20th century and beyond. But Lisa, you have a special relationship with
Luckily, I had the honor of meeting Duke Ellington when I was just a few years out of high school in my early college days. And I had gone to a symposium given by the University of California. It was 3 days of them playing all the music and as much as they could get in the 3 days, and having really fine writers and people who were students of the Ellington tradition discuss him and films of him and so on. And by the end of it, it was like I'd been indoctrinated into the greatest music of the 20th century. But as a young person, not listening that much to Ellington, my uncle had a record store, luckily, and I'd heard a lot of jazz, but I wasn't completely convinced until I had this 3 days of really brainwashing of Ellington. And by the end, he played a concert there, and I luckily got to meet some of his musicians and eventually met him. So it changed my life. It changed the direction of my life, and it was literally a spiritually awakening that hasn't left me. I felt fortunate then and incredibly fortunate now. Yeah.
Wow. And you joined the Mercer Ellington Band when Duke...
I did. Well, Duke first took me on the road while he was still able to do things like that, and took me out to meet and work with the gentlemen of the band for a few months anyway. And it was really tough schooling, of course, to be around, as they call them, the senior citizens of the jazz world. But they were all the greats. Harry Carney and Cootie Williams and Cat Anderson were all still with him. Johnny Hodges had died by then, but Paul Gonsalves, who I adored, and so on. So I did that for a while. And luckily later on, when I was able to come aboard as an actual member of the Ellington Orchestra without Duke, unfortunately, because by then he was gone. His son took me on the road for most of a year, and we traveled all over the United States and played the music of Ellington, but it just wasn't the same. It was still a great, great experience, and I'm happy to have done that, but it wouldn't have happened without Duke taking me aboard earlier on. So,
you know, I have known you for all my time in America, and I've had the pleasure of singing with you. And of course, it's been an extraordinary experience, and I am blessed. And during all that time, it's only today I found out that you actually took lessons with Ben Webster. Am I right in that?
I did. I went over to Europe and again, luckily ran into Ben Webster at a jazz club, not knowing it was him. And I said, I'm really here to hear any music of saxophone players while I was staying there. And he said, well, you should come back next Tuesday because a great saxophone player is here. And it was Ben himself playing. And when he saw me in the audience, he said, if you're really a saxophone player, you should sit on stage with me. And he put a chair next to him on the stage and said, watch what I'm doing, listen to everything I'm doing, and then later on come to my house the next day and I'll show you things. So this kind of started, I didn't want to go anywhere else once I'd heard Ben play. And believe it or not, the Ellington band, the Duke Ellington band came to town while I was there, and they all ended up at Ben's house. And Ben played stride piano, but he was pretty well, shall we say, two sheets to the wind too much to be able to show me very much at the time. But it was a hell of an experience to meet him and to have those few days with him. And there were other musicians hanging around him. So I met other great musicians from Holland at that time. Henny Vonk and Rob Dondenbrock, a really fine pianist. I don't know if Rob's still around, but I wouldn't be surprised. And Henny was a good singer, not to your caliber, Mel, but very fine.
But speaking about singers, you've also worked with Nancy Wilson, Anita O'Day, Sarah Vaughan. I mean, correct.
But again, these were luckily, you know, I've been very fortunate in my career, but as a backup musician, you get the opportunities at the symphony in San Francisco as a part of the concerts that they would do. They would have some jazz series, and I was part of that. So that's where I played with Ella the one night I got to, and Nancy Wilson was several different times on both coasts, some with the Ellington band and then with local bands in San Francisco. She's one of my absolute favorites. Of course, I adore Ella. And Sarah Vaughan just one time for a concert in Chicago. But again, anytime you're in the presence of this greatness, you're just beyond lucky.
And this is in the spirit of what jazz gives us, is this opening into the realm of a deeper
everywhere
life.
The whole world, Melanie, to know you from Ireland and to have played with you as much as I've gotten to and loved it. So, and you bring the Anita O'Day experience to the world, because Anita wasn't that much known, I don't think, as certainly Billie Holiday and most of the other greats. But I think she deserved more fame and recognition than she got. Well, I would say.
I'm hoping to bring that Anita O'Day tribute to sometime when we open again.
We will.
We'd love to have you over for that, Lisa. So
I can't imagine anything I'd rather do.
And tell me more about, and tell everybody about your other part of your life in San Francisco. And that is as leader of
it's called Making a Living. And it had to do with getting fortunate again. I've had scores of luck, but I fell into running a brass band, basically a brass choir in San Francisco, California, and I loved it. For 26 years until the COVID took us out, we'd march up and down the hills of San Francisco playing basically Christian hymns for Chinese people that wanted to have the most extraordinary send-off one could have at the end of their life, going through their part of the city that's all Chinese, and people coming out of their storefronts and their homes and bowing and paying homage to them on their last go around. That ended up to be a way to make a living for me, and a great way to meet other musicians and to help other musicians play and work. Not so much in the jazz tradition, but sometimes we had a chance to play a lot of jazz as well. So that kept the musical doors and the financial doors open for me for the last 26 years, in addition to going to Europe for concerts and things. So.
Yeah. Well, it's an institution there in San Francisco, the Green Street.
Indeed. And something I'm very, very proud of, to have taken a group of musicians of the many years that we did it. My husband was very much involved and wrote a lot of the arrangements for us, but the trumpet players came aboard because they wanted to work with a trumpeter who'd worked with Stan Kenton and Woody Herman's bands. And John had his own big band traditions, having worked with Billy Mays band, and also writing his own arrangements and doing wonderful jazz work around San Francisco. So partnering with John was one of the great moments of my life as well. And then he worked in the brass band and attracted all the great brass players to play with us in North Beach and walk around town just making music for Chinese funerals, which we were very proud to do.
Well, of course, people will know John Coppola very well.
As they should, as a lead trumpet player in Woody's and Stan Kenton's orchestras, even at Carnegie Hall. So what a career John had in addition. And he loved Melanie as well. Of course, everybody does.
We have great memories. I just listened to the original broadcast of my radio show previously, Jazz on the Bay, and you were invited on that show, Lisa, with the band, if you remember. And
I do.
We ended up in O'Reilly's pub.
Where else? Anything for an O'Reilly.
And we'll have to have some sort of reunion because it was a hoot, and everybody in the band started just improvising just over a blues or something like that. It was fantastic. So I have a great memory of yourself and John leading that.
And I think Vince Floriano was with us that day,
yes.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So we had the Italian clan with us, as we needed to have in North Beach. A fine tradition, it is. Yeah.
It's wonderful, and it's just fantastic to relive these memories, especially during this last year or so. And let's Frank, you are also in Oakland. You're not actually very far from each other in California.
I think I can see her on her porch from here. Hi.
Just about. You're invited over anytime.
Great. I'm there.
Come play the Bosendorfer.
Whoa, she has an amazing piano. Oh, that's an incredible instrument.
Another gift, and something I don't deserve, just like most of these things I've discussed. Yeah.
I think everything is for a reason. You deserve that piano.
Oh, bless you.
Bless you.
Frank, a lot of people know you as one of the most prolific and also most sought after pianist,
generous
producer, and I want you to introduce you to a little bit more to the Irish audience. But of course, this goes to the diaspora as well, across the Atlantic to America and now to France. So you have worked with, there's so many people you have worked with that it would take me about a week to say, but I am going to mention a few people, and that is Randy Brecker, Stevie Wonder, Whitney Houston, Al Jarreau, Larry Coryell, Flora Puri Manearto Morera, Narda Michael Waldron, and Herbie Hancock. That's just to name a few. And I only got through two parts of the paragraph there, two sentences. So where did you start to get the interest in jazz?
I guess I was lucky enough to have a teacher that opened my eyes. When I started out playing, I was listening to rock and roll. I was a big rock and roll fan, and I was actually the singer in the band, so that was my start. But my piano teacher said, "Yeah, this is all great, but check this out. I grew up with this guy named Dave Brubeck." And I said, "What do you mean you grew up with me?" They studied together from the same teacher, and so I was lucky enough to be exposed to all of his music. And he said, "Check this guy out. This guy's Miles Davis. This one's Bill Evans. This one's Toots Thielemans, etc., etc." He just opened the doors for me and made me realize, wow, there's more to life than the Kinks. Even though I love rock and roll, it was great, But so anyway, that was the first thing that sparked my interest. I fell in love with listening to different genres. And I think one of the big influences, again, is just being exposed to Brubeck because of the odd times. I became a rhythm freak, and then explored and discovered, wow, it's all over the world. But that was my opening to the excitement of rhythm, because I think what drew me to rock and roll was the rhythm as well, and the energy and all that. And then all of a sudden, wow, it's in these other genres, and then into Brazilian music and Cuban, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the seed that was planted. Just I was lucky enough to meet.
Who was the teacher? Please, Frank, tell us.
Don Burke. And he played for many years. He was legally blind. And but so he couldn't drive. His wife would drive him to his gig. And he told me he was out of work in his entire life 1 week. And that was it. He worked nonstop. But he did piano organ bar, because he would go do gigs, but he would have jam sessions at his house with Bill Naraki, people like that.
Naraki,
one
of my favorite drummers in the world.
Oh, wonderful drummer, and he's just what's the bass player they always played with that recently passed?
Mario
Sirachi, yeah.
Yeah.
So jams at his house. So anyway, I was lucky enough to fall into that. Just one of those things. That was the seed.
Yes.
And then go ahead.
You had a great career in Los Angeles as well. Am I right, Frank? Or spent time there, and then you did a show for Los Angeles in San Francisco, or there was some connection. You did a TV show where you were the resident band.
Oh, well, in San Francisco there was a TV show called The Afternoon Show, and through that I did it for a couple of years. It was kind of like a Letterman band kind of thing, the quartet, and we would back up whoever came to town. And so Mel Torme would show up, and we'd accompany Mel Torme, or Cab Calloway, just before he passed. It's like, good Lord, and that list is huge. Herbie Hancock would come in, and we jammed forever, with Herbie, and being on a show like that, you're just blessed to see who's coming in today. It was, there's too many names, and a lot of TV personalities, of course, we would back up, which is still fun, but
was it during that show that you met Herbie Hancock?
No, I first met Herbie Hancock at this recording studio called the Automat Recording Studio. It's no longer in San Francisco. But I was recording there with Narada Michael Walden, and this was 1980, I would guess, right around there. And we were there. The studio had 4 rooms, and one of the rooms down the hall was Herbie Hancock's room. And so I would see him, here and there, and so he would come into our sessions, and talk shop a little bit with him, or listen, and so. And, I'd get all excited about a new synthesizer, and I'd say, "Herbie, check it out. I got the new Oberheim, And he's, "Oh, that's really nice." Then he said, "Come with me." So we go down the hall and, go into his studio, and it's just like wall-to-wall keyboards. And this is before that thing called MIDI, where all the keyboards can play together. He says, "Step on this button." And I stepped on this button, and the whole room started to play. And it's like, what the heck is going on? I couldn't believe it. And he said, "Check out my Rhodes." And I played his Rhodes. So that was the first time I met him. But the first time to play with him was on the TV show, and then I played with him a few times later as well.
Because, of course, Herbie Hancock is so well known internationally, but he also is the one of the people who is part of the UNESCO International Jazz Day Institute, and as he's an ambassador for intercultural dialogue and chairman of the Herbie Hancock Institute of Jazz, who have partnered with International Jazz Day. So he's a man of many talents, shall we say, and is very, very passionate about bringing jazz as it's a language of peace, really, I think.
And he's so approachable. It's crazy, you know.
Yeah.
He's just like so sweet, not a superstar of any kind. In fact, I remember actually met him like 5 or 6 years before that, I had a fusion band that we opened for him, and that was the first time I talked to him, and he was so friendly and talking about his rhythms, and you know, it was just, I don't know, he was just the coolest guy. Still is the greatest guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And Frank, you have had various bands as well that you have led, but you've also been part of. So it really across the board, you were saying fusion is also a big part of, you know, you've been with Mike Narder Waldron, for example, and you showed us a lot of photos recently of your time with him and the band, and you've really gone right across the board. And where do you now, with the recent lockdown, you've also been busy with education and also your online concerts, which, by the way, I attended, which I totally loved.
Yeah, there's this whole pandemic is, you know, it's pretty awful when you think of the human toll. It's devastating. Mm-hmm. Separate from that, there's opportunity here for artists as well. We've been able to hone our craft, spend the time at home working on things, learning new skills like how do you work with Zoom and, you know, communicate with the world, how do you perform online and make a living, how do you teach online, all that kind of stuff. So in a way, there's a positive part to this where we've learned new skills that we can go forward with, even if it kind of goes back to sort of what it was. It's not the same anymore. Now it's expanded. So that's pretty awesome, you know. So I love being able to speak to anyone around the world now. You know, I can take a lesson, let alone offer a lesson from somebody around the world, you know, which is pretty awesome, you know. So I feel blessed. But yeah, the whole Narda thing was awesome. He called me out of the blue when he moved to San Francisco in the late 70s and said, hey, let's get together and play. You know, I'm looking for somebody, and, you know, my students, because he was just teaching drum students for $25 a lesson, trying to survive. And he said, you know, let's get together and play. Yeah. So we got together, and I happened to be into the fusion thing at the time, and that was his whole world then, having just left John McLaughlin and Weather Report and all of that stuff, and Jeff Beck. So we got together and played, and because of my love of that, we hit it off great. But I loved R&B, and that's his world too, and that led to countless records with the, like you mentioned, some of the names, you know. So it's just kind of, that's been a blessing that's ongoing. We're in touch all the time, you know, like it's, even though we're not playing, you know, hardly at all because of the pandemic. And even before that, we weren't playing that much because, you know, I left the camp and on to doing different things. And he's got a new, you know, set of musicians that he works with. They're all wonderful. So, but we stay in touch all the time. My daughter's birthday is his birthday. His son's birthday is my birthday. So there's some connection. I don't know what that is.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And you, for the last 25 years, you've been a member of Sting's Rainforest Band.
Yes. That's been awesome. That was another one of those flukes. Just happened to we just finished a record with Steve Winwood. And so Steve, for the record company, said, you come to LA and play the single off the record for this show on VH1 Awards show. And well, of course, yeah, I'd love to go. And then they called back like a few days later and said, oh, it looks like it's going to be a bigger show because you do 4 songs. Of course we can do 4 songs, absolutely. And they called back, it looks like Shaka Khan needs somebody to back her up. Would you guys mind backing up Shaka? Oh, James Taylor just called. Would you mind backing up? Oh, Stevie Wonder just called. Would you mind backing up Stevie Wonder on 4 tunes? It's like, you know, I'm going, what is going on here? So because of that huge show, we became, you know, the pit band kind of for everyone, except Prince had his own band, you know. and which is a pretty good band, to say the least. You know, he was pretty good. So we didn't get to work with him, but everyone else. And but in the crowd was Sting. Bruce Springsteen said, hey, because Sting said, I'm looking for a musical director for my next Carnegie Hall show. And he said, oh, you should check out Narda, you know, really. So he came to the show and came backstage afterwards and said, great job, you know, you come to New York, we're doing Carnegie Hall with the Rainforest Band, and I'll explain more later, but, you know, all these stars, yada, yada. And he said, sure, but I need my musical director too, Frank. And so, yeah, great. So that started it, and 25 years later, you know, I'm not sure if it's going to continue now, but we had a great run, you know.
Yeah. And all for a good cause.
All for a great cause. It's been awesome. Yeah, Sting was going to do 10 years of it, and I couldn't stop after that. He committed to helping for 10, and he did it for 30 full years. We didn't come on until, you know, after it had already started.
Wow.
So anyway, yeah, that was one of those. Thank you very much. I'll take it. You know, it was so fun to work with the best players in New York. Good Lord, you know, I was humbled every time I walked on stage. Just to stand on Carnegie Hall stage is overwhelming. It's almost like I'm not worthy, you know. And then to be able to go back there a number of times and then accompany everybody. I mean, imagine on stage with Nina Simone. I mean, good Lord, you know. It's just, I can't tell you how blessed I feel, you know. Even though sometimes my role might have been there are 3 keyboard players to hold the note, sustaining the C or something, you know. That might have been my role and accompanying some of these stars, and other times more, of course, but it didn't matter. Just to share, you know, share the stage with them was, thank you very much, you know.
Well, Frank, I have a memory now as you're talking about Carnegie Hall. What you said to me when we played the National Concert Hall in Dublin in the John Field Room. It's a beautiful, you know, building.
Beautiful.
And I think you walked in, and I remember you looking around and saying, "Oh, wow, this reminds you of Carnegie Hall." So
yeah,
I was very quite humbled by that, and it was lovely.
Yeah,
to have
beautiful. A lot of history in that room as well, you know. So yeah, that was a great, fun concert.
Yeah,
thank you.
Oh.
I have to say that the time that I heard Frank accompany Melanie, which was when I first met Jack Dorsey, who became my drummer after I clipped him away from you as soon as I could. And he's one of the most tasty drummers when we're talking about Naraki. And then we talk about this marvelous guy, and who I fell madly in love with his taste and his joy at being alive. And he's just such a marvelous man. And again, but your concert with Mel was the first time I met you, Frank, and I didn't know you at all, and you just wowed me to death. And you're a marvelous bassist as well. But Mel just sang like a bird, and it was one of her finest moments. And I'd worked with her a long time prior to that, and never knew what she had in her until you accompanied her. So, just want to say that about both of you. Really.
And I worked with your husband John. I worked teaching at the Jazz Camp West. First time
I know
at camp, we shared this cabin together. Great
God
guy.
help him.
He could cook.
I know.
Cook.
It might take all night, but he could.
Yes,
cook.
well, that's true.
Well, I'm going to bring in Jericho now from France, because also there's a nice link, Frank, in that Jericho has already played your arrangements of the Celtic jazz music of the original material.
Honored.
Of my original material.
That was great. That was a lot of work, but it was well written and sound pretty good. That was nice. That was a great experience.
So in a way, you've already met.
Yeah,
music, so.
yeah.
And Jericho, you are based in Caen, in Normandy.
Yes. It's a wonderful region, and this is where in France jazz arrived post the World War II. So at the Liberation, jazz spread by Normandy in France, and we're very fortunate to welcome all these people that fought for our liberty. And jazz is profoundly and suddenly merged into this liberty way of life. Yeah.
Yeah.
What a lovely way to say it.
That's a very nice way of saying it. Yeah, lovely. And of course, as a piano player, you play with various groups, but you also have your own band.
Yes, yeah. I started playing. Bill Evans died, peace on his soul, on the 15th September of 1980. I was born 1 year later, so I'll be 40 and I joined Pat Berry on this prophet. If jazz is a religion, Bill Evans is one of the prophets for all pianists. And I discovered him when I was 12 years old, along with Keith Jarrett, another great American pianist, peace on his soul, because he cannot play anymore, and I think his left hand is not kind of working anymore. So I think of him. So those two major pianists really influenced me. And when I was a young teenager in France, so as you can see, I'm a French African. I was looking for a prophet across Atlantic in the United States, and I was listening to jazz. I was listening to hip hop. I was listening to Wu-Tang Clan. I was watching Michael Jordan's video. So American jazz had a great influence on me. So I started after high school to study at the American school in Paris, and I had the chance to study with Stephen Carbonara, Peter Giron, and all those great pedagogues. And I was very fortunate to work with these people, and started to play in Paris and with different band sorry for my English sometimes. The combo I used to play most was the trio, and so again, Bill Evans was a great influence for me, and he brought, I think, this impressionist way of playing piano from composer of the late 90s like Ravel, Debussy, Fauré, other great French composer. So, well, if jazz is a religion, I'm blessed.
Yes. Well, it's fantastic to have you, Jericho. And the other person, or the other group that you work with is Jazz Club de Normandie.
Yes.
And Frédéric Le Marchand.
Yeah, which is the president, and we're very honored to welcome you, Melanie, back again in France with the tunes we've been rehearsed and play at in Normandy last year, and to work again with the Frank Martin's arrangement. So we're very proud to be the French side of the Celtic jazz band of Melanie O'Reilly. So, and the Jazz Club de Normandy has been for 25 years in Normandy, yes, and we're very pleased to welcome you again on 2021.
Yeah, thank you. And all going well. Absolutely, you know, I'm absolutely longing to get over there with the restrictions lifting, we hope. So this is lovely how we bring it all together. I mean, you know, across the Atlantic, and bring Europe in, and Ireland and America. And I'm going to bring in Pat now, because to introduce Pat, well, no stranger to Lear Media TV audience. He is also an aficionado of jazz and has his own program. But in fact, Pat, I met you actually, I think we met at the Cork Jazz Festival, but you renewed the contact at the beginning of the first lockdown in March. Last.
That's right, and I phoned you up. I want to talk to you, but I didn't say it quite like that. I'd like to talk. But Lisa, well, listen to the there. The reason I'm so quiet is I just love things. I just listen to lots. I've been involved in radio over 20 years, and I always made it a point. There would be some jazz program or some jazz music program on the schedule locally here. And so it's only a small bit, but I think that as Frank was saying, all of you were saying that people just open your mind to different musics, you know, different genres of music. And indeed, I think people have toiled away for years and years and years, particularly in Ireland, where there's a small community we have, and it's very traditional, but it's very rich as well, musically speaking. And we've had, of course, our own Louis Stewart. I only mentioning Louis Stewart because I know him, and I saw him a few times. A world-class musician, and many, many more as well. And Melanie, we have singers. I mean, Melanie, you know, on the island of Ireland, which are fantastic. But Lisa, I want to come back to you, Lisa. When you had your music in your family when you were growing up, because, and that's the first part of the question. The second part is just a simple thing. It's an idiosyncratic of myself is you prefer tenor or soprano sax. How did you come to the saxophone?
Oh, that's a funny story that I actually got to tell Duke Ellington. In high school, in order to get out of a classical class that I couldn't stand, where they made you listen to opera, and I'd already had my fill of opera with my uncle in his record store, so I didn't want more of that. And they said, you must take an instrument. So I took up the clarinet, which I absolutely loved at first. But when I heard our swing band in the high school, there were the older kids playing Duke Ellington music, and they were playing swing versions of musicals that I knew, you know, like West Side Story and things like that. But they were playing Mood Indigo, and I went to the band director and said, I want to play that song. I just have to play Mood Indigo. And he said, well, you'll have to learn the tenor saxophone, because there's a tenor saxophone solo on the Mood Indigo. But it really was a clarinet solo, which was really even funnier. And then when Duke Ellington asked me the same question, I actually got to tell him that I was conned into learning the saxophone in order to play his song Mood Indigo. I couldn't believe I was telling that story to Duke himself when he asked me that very question. I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, and he laughed. He said, but that's a clarinet solo. I said, I know. Now I know, after collecting 250 Duke Ellington albums. So, you know, and that's albums. That's before the CDs came out with everything else. But I really became engaged in knowing everything Ellington after hearing that symposium and meeting them all. So
I was interested in Webster because we had a competition one time on the shows. I think we played 4 or 5 saxophones. I didn't think we'd get information, but most answers that came in had them all. But for some reason or another, most of the wrong answers were Ben Webster's one. They didn't recognize Webster, you know. Well, they did in the end, but I mean, saying more of them couldn't make him up. But I thought he was very distinctive myself. I think he'd be one of the very first that you'd recognize, you know, before other saxophone players as well. But what did you think? I'm interested in finding out what you taught yourselves as living and working performers, the 4 of you here around me, in some way or another, about Ken Burns' documentary on the history of jazz. I mean, I thought that was fantastic myself.
I did as well. And I see that he didn't pay the homage that Lester Young deserved. I think he was more or less left out of some of it more than he should have been, for certain. But you can't do it all. And I think Ken Burns did an outstanding job of recognizing and appreciating and understanding the evolution of it all. Again, in my college years, right at the point that I met Ellington, I met a wonderful writer by the name of Philip Elwood, who was a very engaged local writer who taught history, and he taught history of American jazz in my college. And he got me started at adoring it and understanding where it really had come from, and the blues and all of the important people in jazz. And the more that can be taught and opened up to the world, I think it's definitely the greatest gift that America gave, you know, the world, is jazz music. And of course it's universal now and needs to be more universal, but it should be appreciated more than it is, and taught more than it is, and opened up to. I mean, Frank Martin is so right. When your ears get open to this incredible music, there's nothing like it. And Duke describing jazz as freedom of expression, I think says everything. That's really what it is that you have the freedom to express yourself in that music, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
I think you had people like Mozart, and then you had composers, the composers in jazz, are akin, are likened to them in the 1920s, in my opinion, you know.
Yeah, no, totally, Pat. And I think that my experience being in America was incredibly important as a jazz musician, as a jazz singer, because I went to the home of where it all began. Even now, of course, even though it's developed into an international form, but it really helped me to focus and to really feel to get the experience with yourselves included, but the actual jazz as an art form, as you say, was introduced in America. So, and the African American experience, and that came out of that, and now it's completely an international music. And I'm very aware also in France, and Jericho, you might tell us a little bit about the French experience of jazz, and the French welcomed jazz, it seems to be, in a way which was very unusual, I think, very quickly, as far as history says.
Yes, it's true. When it first arrived in France, it came with a way of life. It came with a way of speaking about freedom. And I joined Lisa Coppola, and it's freedom of expression. You can say whatever you want, when you want, as long as you respect the people that are around you. And it's the same in a jazz band, as we play it in France. You respect the guy and the woman you play with, you respect the audience, and you have the ability to express yourself freely. And this was new, because before America in France, it was Nazi. So the freedom of expression, and we welcome this very, 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 very profoundly. And another aspect is the Afro-American welcome in France, because in America, there were a lot of racism, segregation. American Afro-American jazzmen, they were feeling very well and very well treated in Paris and in other areas of France. And it was
like Billy Strayhorn, for one.
Yes, it's true. It's very true. So it was a land of welcoming for these Afro-American and others. And And anyway, there's always be a profound bound between France and America, and France and the Anglo-Saxon way of playing jazz. And it traced back to some civil rights, the Constitution, Constitution. And so that's, I think, the way we welcome and spread this music at that time as French.
Lovely, lovely. Well, I feel that when in France, there is this warmth to the music. And I'm lucky being Irish as well. They like the Irish music as well, the Celtic jazz, le jazz celtique. And Frank, you are very much part of the fabric of the education, bringing jazz to so many people, so many students through the California Jazz Conservatory, through UC Berkeley Jazz Department, and then your own students. Do you feel that there's more interest in the last few years?
So I think the opportunity to perform has become a little bit more challenging because of just not as many jazz clubs and et cetera venues. But the interest is there, especially when you expose new things to young minds and hearts and souls. It's just the interest is profoundly there. I mean, my students are like so excited, to learn everything they can and perform, and especially right now, they're so excited to return to playing together. But no, I think it's alive and well. Those Esperanza Spaldings of the world that are being creative out there, and the young Joey Alexanders. I mean, the list is huge. There's so much incredible talent. No less than there's ever been. Probably more. It's just, I think it's alive and well. It's just the exposure. Back in the day, you could hear everything you wanted to hear on the radio. And now it's a bit more challenging here, because of, corporate radio stations that have us, they might play a certain style of music and that's it. And so the exposure for many is less, When I was a kid, I could turn the radio on and I could hear everybody on the same radio station. It might be Duke Ellington, and then it might be Weather Report, then it might be Jefferson Airplane. I mean, all
Right.
on the same show, and all quality music, just different genres, you know? So that's changed a bit. So I feel my job and our job as educators is exposure, just showing them. Yeah, this door is great, but look over there. Look at that door, you know? There's India. Check out these tabla players, you know? Yada,
Yeah.
yada. It's just around the world, music is alive. One thing I love about Paris, it's a mecca of North African, East African. I mean, just the whole world is there now. It's kind of like New York, you know? It's just everything is there. Every time I go there, I get so excited to go hear music because I know there's a creativity going on that sometimes lacks here. Here there's a tradition, even though that's not fair. There's of course creativity, but there's more of a tradition here. Everybody wants to play like, you know, John Coltrane and Michael Brecker or whoever, and they should. But every time I go to Paris, they've got a whole video going on at the same time as the creativity of new music. And I saw last time I was there, Wen Lee, a great guitar player, a friend of mine, took me into this club, says, check out this band I'm going to play with tonight. And the singer's got 4 microphones on a table, each with its own effects, you know, and her husband's playing keyboards and running video, but not pre-programmed video, creating it on the spot. And I mean, I don't know, it's just creative stuff. So I love Paris because it's vibrant, it's so alive, and you don't get better musicians than you get in Paris, you know. It's just phenomenal. But music is alive and well. Jazz creativity is so alive. I'm excited.
That's a lovely note to round up the program today. It's been an absolute pleasure to see you all again and to bring jazz to the Irish airways, but also online now to internationally, and to hear your views and your experiences and your jazz journeys, all of you. And it's been an absolute, pleasure seeing you all again. And I look forward to seeing you. We'll follow up with a part 2 with each of you. All right, and we'll have a little bit more music as well. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes.
Lisa.
Great to chat with everyone.
Lovely to meet you.
Jericho, Pat.
The two, Jericho especially. I remember.
Yes, thank you, Pat. Thank you, Melanie, for making this thing happen, and Pat as well. This is awesome.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Get to meet new friends. I love it.
Oh.
Hello. How are you doing?
This is the new version of A-Train.
Yes. And so let's do this again.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Ah.
All right. What a wonderful way to celebrate International Jazz Day with my colleagues, saxophonist Lisa Pollard, Coppola, piano player, arranger, producer Frank Martin, and Jericho Traore from France. Also, we had Pat Berry from Lear Media TV. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Melanie O'Reilly, on Jazz Across the Bay, and produced by Lear Media TV, in affiliation with Wexford Arts Centre and Jazz Appreciation Series. We hope that you will join us for our next program of Jazz Across the Bay in late May. Please join our jazz community by going to the website of Lear Media TV and Wexford Arts Centre, and make sure you let them know that you'd like to join our new jazz community of Jazz Across the Bay. Thank you so much. Bannacht live, agus slán go fóill.
A group of stars